What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Now we are supposed to be here today looking ahead to tomorrow's game against St Mirren, back to league duty after the international break. But with AGM today, there was always going to be some discussion around it in this video. Given how it has unfolded today, it will now form the majority of this video, and we might discuss the St Mirren game briefly at the end. So as you know, it was the annual general meeting today. It passed and unfolded in a pretty explosive manner. You could say that's predictable given the build-up to it, everything that's gone on this year, this summer, the backlash and the groundswell of opinion against the board. I think it is predictable that that's how things unfolded today. Now we're going to run through that. We're going to look at the quite unbelievable statement from Ross Desmond in there as well that led to the adjournment of the meeting. Now, I wasn't there in the room today. I'm putting together accounts of people who were and the videos that have been shared online, which I'm sure some of you have watched. I think the news spread pretty quickly, and I think we were all following the updates from the people who were there throughout the course of the meeting. Now, it appears from minute one as the board entered the AGM, they were roundly booed. There was a red card sort of protest where people were holding up red sheets of paper. There was also chants of sack the board as the meeting begun. Now, I don't think that's, surely no one on the board could be really surprised that there was some form of protest, even booing and chanting in some way. Again, I think it would be a grave misunderstanding of the pulse and the temperature of the fan base right now to think that there wouldn't be some sort of disgruntlement on the arrival of the board at the beginning of the meeting. Now, Peter Lawwell adjourned the meeting for 30 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes in, because there was disruption and there was heckling from the crowd. I think there was a question asked about can we move on and get to the questions rather than watching the video, the sort of standard video that plays at the beginning of these meetings, where it'll be like a montage of some of the board members talking, and it will maybe mention some of the highlights on the field in the last year or whatever it might be. I think there was from the floor, I think there was a question to move past that and get to the questions. That was rejected, and then further heckling, and then it was adjourned. So I don't want to get bogged down too much again, because I'm going on second-hand accounts here, so I don't want to get bogged too much down in the detail. But there's 30-minute adjournment. They came back. I think some members of the audience, some shareholders, left because when they returned, the video did play, and then they returned after the video was finished. I think there was then some comment within the video and then from Peter Lawwell and Michael Nicholson before Ross Desmond said that he would like to speak, and read from a pre-written statement that he had prepared. Now, I think the big thing that's clear is there's a lot of anger. There's been a lot of anger throughout the last few months towards the Celtic board. I think, like everybody knows, everybody who watches this channel knows where I stand on this. I've been right there with it. I completely understand it. I think the supporters are right to be upset, but what I think is happening is the club have repeatedly doubled down and became defensive and aggressive, and I think inflammatory and provocative at times. And I think, again, there's been a couple of occasions, a couple of statements that have come out that have gone down so poorly and been so poorly judged, and they've shown a real inability to read the room, the Celtic board, about how they should manage this and how they should respond to it. And again, today is possibly the worst example of that. They have literally not read the room. They've gone into a room full of angry shareholders who have a right to be upset, and instead of coming with a tone of contrition and showing a willingness to pursue genuine reconciliation and really listen to the concerns of the supporters. Yes, there was heckling, and I accept that, but immediately it was shut down, and immediately it was like, we're going to finish at 12:30 regardless here. Now, I listened to Jim Orr on Axom earlier. I thought he was really, really good on it, and he made that point that if the club were genuinely wanting to go in there and listen to the concerns and get their points across and show the actionable steps that they want to take to right the wrongs and the mistakes that on the one hand they're admitting to, but on the other hand they aren't they're denying any sort of mistake. If you go back to Desmond's statement, where Brendan Rodgers couldn't pinpoint a single mistake they'd made in recruitment or time that Brendan Rodgers had been let down. So I think that's very, very difficult to see how that was going to calm the people in the room, how that approach was going to calm people down and get to the questions and get to the sort of crux of the matter at today's AGM. And again, I think a big takeaway for some people when it was finally adjourned was that, well, that's appalling that the opportunity to ask questions has been passed up by the disruption. Now, it was passed up because Peter Lawwell, during Ross Desmond's statement, took that decision to adjourn it after repeatedly saying that people had to calm down. But again, the tone of that was all wrong. He interrupted Ross Desmond once to ask people to stop with the heckling, but he did it in a manner where he told them to behave, which again is just not the right tone at all. He also made a jibe, Peter Lawwell, about, I know there's a lot of people here who are attending the AGM for the first time, which again just doesn't strike the right tone. That's not the right tone to be going about things. And again, I think where we ended up in terms of people thinking, well, because of the disruption, the adjournment, the opportunity to ask questions and get answers has been passed up. What I would say to that is that the board have been answering questions at these AGMs for years and years and years. After things like the summer, where we're ill prepared, the recruitment operation is clearly fundamentally flawed, and if it's not the recruitment operation, then it's the strategy and how the club deals with process around transfer bids. There's clearly issues there has been for a long time. These are the things that have cost Celtic Champions League qualification in the last 5 consecutive years, where we've had to go through qualifying rounds, and 7 out of the last 9 to clubs with minuscule resources compared to Celtic, which is something we're going to come back to. Those things are the threads that have been bubbling away in the background for a long, long time. And I think the domestic success has masked these issues. Now, for years, the Celtic board have been answering questions at AGMs and saying empty phrases like they always say, like they said today in some ways. We recognise mistakes. I've said this in numerous videos and I don't want to dwell on it because I know I'm repeating myself. Recognise mistakes but then take no action and then make the same mistakes again the next year. That's what's been happening for more than a decade now, and that's the underlying issue here. So yes, we could have had absolutely no disruption today, I'm sure, and then we may well have got to some questions, but it'd been the same answers, the same sort of lip service answers, where they pretend they're listening, they pretend they're going to make progress and change things, and they never do. Why would the same people who, on the one hand, are telling you our strategy is excellent and there's no flaws in it, why would they make changes to that? Because all they can do is just say, we know mistakes were made, we recognise that, but then nothing comes off the back of that. There's never any actionable steps, there's never any real change, and it's still the same people who are overseeing everything. Why would there be any change? And why would listening to the answers and getting to ask all the questions, like the questions that were asked at the recent fan meeting between the board and the fan groups, they listened to the questions there, questions were asked, questions were answered, nothing meaningful comes from it. It is total lip service. So I think the value lost in not being able to get to the questions today is minimal. It is genuinely minimal. But anyway, let's move on, because I think the big headline from this is Ross Desmond's statement. And I think it's incredible, following the statement of his dad, Desmond, after Brendan Rodgers left the club, and the unprofessional nature of it. The tone of it, I think, was terrible, and we covered that at the time. But again, I think today, to come into a room of disgruntled shareholders where you know there's anger in the room, and to proceed with a statement like this is terribly, terribly ill-judged. Now, you could say that Desmond wrote this statement for him to read out. Again, I find it incredible. And one of the first things that Ross Desmond said today was, let me start by dispensing this absurd caricature some people spread about my father. What, like the one that he's an absentee landlord and he never turns up to AGMs? And here you are in his place again. And state some of his Celtic credentials, and again just going over the fact that he's a passionate lifelong supporter, and like things that, again, the point here is not about what he's saying, it's about the fact that he's starting his statement at the AGM, where the AGM, you think if they're coming in with the right intentions to listen, to show contrition, to try and show us how they're going to move forward and changes they might make, to start it by saying, let me start by dispensing this absurd theory that some of yous have got about my dad. Again, it just gets off on the wrong foot straight away. I don't want to read out the entire thing because we'll be here forever. I'm sure most of you have watched the video, but again, it had the usual platitudes about the board sharing the desires. But again, we need to act prudently, not recklessly, as if, again, that this agitation from the supporters is about acting recklessly. It's about throwing fortunes at things. It's not. It's about the fundamental flaws in the structure and the recruitment operation that have been there for years and keep costing Celtic on the pitch time and time again. Now, he also went into a long paragraph about how the financial independence of the club was jeopardised in the 90s, which is again extraordinary because the club is nowhere near in that position, and to justify poor strategy by rolling out the 1990s tells you everything about where the board's head is really at on this. He mentioned twice, so we will not be bullied by aggressive or irrational factions. We will not be railroaded by those whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment and by those who degrade the club. Now, that is an astonishing statement to level at Celtic supporters. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what group they're part of. It doesn't matter what small element of the Celtic support he is referring to. For the son of the principal, the son of the single largest shareholder to sit in an AGM and say that we will not be bullied by people whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment. I think the main vocation of a lot of people in that room and most people that follow the club through thick and thin and put their hand in their pocket every year, their main vocation in life is following Celtic and funding the football club. And I think that statement is, it's a terrible, terrible indictment on Ross Desmond, on Dermot Desmond, and on the rest of the board, whether they were aware or not that he was going to sit there and say that. I find that statement absolutely incredible. Now, did the board and did Ross Desmond expect that a room full of angry, disgruntled people, shareholders, supporters, were going to sit and listen to a statement like that and not react to it? This is about, again, not reading the room, not understanding the feeling that people have about this situation and towards them, but also, I think more clearly than that, not caring and not coming in with the right intentions to have a productive meeting where you want to listen to the supporters' concerns. That is inflammatory, it's provocative, it's defensive, and I think that the word in there and the tone of it yet again is appalling. It's appalling. And he talks about, and this is the thread through both Dermot Desmond's statement after Brendan Rodgers left and this one today, there's a total double standard in it because he says by those who degrade the club. What could be more degrading to the club than the son of the major shareholder sitting in an AGM criticising and saying that the elements of the sport are bullies whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment? What can be more degrading than that to the football club? And yet again, because of the actions of Ross Desmond, the statement of Ross Desmond today, Celtic is now national news because of the laughingstock that became today's AGM, just like Celtic was national news when it became a laughingstock after Dermot Desmond's unprofessional statement following Brendan Rodgers' resignation. So what is doing the most damage to the reputation of the football club here? Now, it went on to say that criticism and advice are welcome and the right of every supporter, but again, these are things that are, I think, empty platitudes, because I think a lot of the action that the collective have taken, and there was a meeting that was taken in good faith there. There was no destructive and cynical elements to the meeting, and I think that there's a grave misrepresentation here that the people who have criticisms of the Celtic board are a really small destructive element whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment, when the reality is a groundswell of Celtic supporters now think that the Celtic board is not fit for purpose because of the flaws in the strategy that have repeated themselves year after year over the last decade or more. If you go back to the summer, 40,000 people filled out a Google form, which again is the only scalable way to get the opinion of that many people in a short space of time. 40,000 people, and a high 90% of them agreed with the statements about wanting accountability from the board and the things that the board had to provide in terms of the vision of the club and the recruitment operation and various other things that were involved in that. But I think there is an attempt from the club to make this, make the dividing lines like this is only just coming from the Green Brigade or this is coming from ultras and they're being destructive and that's not the Celtic support, and that's not the case. I think, like I say, the summer was the straw that broke the camel's back with a huge swathe of the Celtic support, and I think it's disingenuous to try and make this. He went on to talk about the incident at the Falkirk game, which the club is going to war with the Green Brigade on. Again, this is not about the Green Brigade versus the Celtic board. There is thousands and tens of thousands of people who have got legitimate concerns about the way the club is being run, and he has tried to reduce it to this tiny small element that he talks about all the time, and the fact that that is not representative. Again, if you remember in his statement, Desmond effectively blamed Brendan Rodgers for the action and the protests that have happened against the board. And now Ross Desmond is blaming the support and saying that these attempts to dehumanise and vilify the board are shameful. Now, I think, again, that's that dividing line that I'm talking about. They're trying to make it like this is just the actions of a small faction of supporters and they're totally out of order and everybody here loves the club. And again, it completely misses the point, and I think it deliberately misses the point, because it's like a divide and conquer sort of move from them. Now, again, I think that it got to the end of the statement. Sorry, I'll just round it off. These people are bullies. Again, he used the word bully, and they try to hijack the good name of Celtic supporters. We cannot allow them to define who we are. I'm well aware of the target I've put in my back when I say this. I think the comments around the Falkirk game garnered the most vociferous reaction from the attendees as well, and then Peter Lawwell interrupted to basically say that the meeting would be adjourned and it would end. And again, there was booing, there was chants chants against the board. People were raising their red cards again, and I think that the meeting ended. So I think to try and sum up where we are, I think this is the end. Metaphorically, this is the end for this Celtic board. They have a huge swathe of unhappy shareholders, and it has reached the point where they cannot hold a productive annual general meeting with them. I think that is the end. That's the end for a board. Again, I think some people will come away and say that this was all the fault of the people who were there heckling and disrupting, as you may well put it, but I think I've already sort of given you my thoughts on that. And I think where we go from here, Ross Desmond has said that it'll only strengthen. He said as part of this statement, our focus is on what matters, and all it does is strengthen our resolve to protect the integrity and stability of the football club. They're not going to cede. They're not going to give up any ground. They're not going to change anything. They're not going to get any new people on board. They're not going to replace any of the non-execs who have been there for 20 plus years. They're past doubling down now. This is like triple down, quadruple down. They are unwilling to listen to criticism, and that is the thing that's clear here. Now, saying we recognise there's been mistakes is not listening to criticism, because what they say is these mistakes, we can't get into them in any detail, we can't talk about individual cases, we know we've made mistakes. And again, I just divert you back to the same mistakes being made for the best part of a decade or more now. That's not improving, that's not changing, that's not taking on criticism and advice. And I think the nature of it, I get that people are angry on both sides. I think the Desmonds are angry. I think that's why they react like this at every opportunity they get. But I think it's incumbent on the people who have the responsibility and the onus to be on the board of a club like Celtic, to act in a calm, conciliatory manner. I think that's the responsibility you have. You have to show leadership. You have to show strong leadership. You have to be courageous, and you have to be willing to genuinely listen to people, and to see the flaws in your own strategy, not to double down on it when the results and the things that have happened on the pitch and the context that's been talked about here keep happening time and time again. And I think there's been a real lack of that. There's been a real lack of contrition. And again, that's a theme for Celtic over a number of years now. There was a huge lack of contrition through the COVID season for the mistakes that were made there. And again, and when they come under pressure and there's criticism and there's questions about the vision of the club and where it's going, and the qualifications of the people who hold the key positions at the football club and at the executive level, when there's questions around that, they batten down the hatches, they double down, they become defensive, they try and blame everybody, the media, the supporters, anybody, you name it. Somebody else will take the blame for this, and they'll just try and hide behind it until the anger dissipates. Now, unfortunately for them, all of these steps they're taking, from the statement in the summer to how everything unfolded, Desmond's statement following Brendan Rodgers leaving, how the AGM unfolded today, the statement of Ross Desmond, everything they're doing is amplifying people's anger, and that is not going to fix this for them. I think they have to be willing to, they are not willing to acknowledge, genuinely acknowledge that the problems and the mistakes and the flaws in the structure. So we're at an impasse. There's not going to be any change on this. I don't expect there to be any change from their side. I certainly don't expect there to be any change on the side of the supporters who would like to see change, who have watched the flaws in the model unfold over numerous years and have it papered over by winning league titles. I think there's absolutely no way forward here. Now, that does leave me feeling very indifferent. I think the way the club have handled this, the way the people who are in positions of responsibility at the club have handled this, in a sense, drives me away. Not away from being a Celtic supporter, of course, because that's in your blood, but my God, it doesn't half make you feel disillusioned with them. And really, the saddest thing about all of this is that the football sort of becomes a bit insignificant. I think what's going on here and the way it's being handled is bigger than the football that's going on in the pitch just now, and that's a really sad indictment of where we're at. And I think with proper leadership and proper intention of the people on the board to genuinely learn, to genuinely improve, to genuinely listen, I don't think we would be here. And so I don't know how I leave that part of the discussion. I don't see how we go forward. It's a terrible situation that's been handled terribly by the people who should have the leadership and the ability to do better. But unfortunately, they keep showing us time and time again that they don't. Even on the communication front, which is the lowest hanging fruit for Celtic right now, Ross Desmond says again today, and in this statement, unbelievably, he says, we could communicate better. As you're reading out this statement attacking supporters at an AGM, you are saying the words, we could communicate better. If that doesn't sum up the lack of awareness here on the board's behalf, nothing will. It is tone deaf in the extreme, and the lack of self-awareness there and the lack of awareness about what the actual problems are here is astounding. And again, I just want to flag that this is the last bit on the statement that we'll do. He made, again, a remarkable statement about the club's progress in Europe, where he said, those who talk about the club not having kicked on in Europe since 2003 ignore the enormous change in the financial landscape of football in that period. I mean, that is just disingenuous in the extreme. I keep saying disingenuous for statements like this. It's the only thing I can say. Does he genuinely believe that the supporters think, or the supporters are not aware of the changing financial landscape in European football? Does he genuinely believe that we don't know that? But let me list the clubs, as you well know, and as Ross Desmond well knows, the clubs who have eliminated Celtic in Europe in the last 10 years. Maribor, Malmo, Cluj, Ferencváros, Bodo Glimt, Midtjylland, Kairat Almaty. What about the enormous financial disparity in those cases? And the financial disparity in those cases was with us. It was in favour of us against those tiny football clubs with minuscule resources compared to our own, who eliminated Celtic in Europe. So don't gaslight the supporters with a statement like that says, well, those that have said we'd no kicked on in Europe, they just don't understand that the finances have changed. I mean, that is like insulting your intelligence, again, to the absolute extreme. Does he really expect that we'll believe this? Does he really expect that we'll swallow this and just go, oh, I hadn't thought about that? That'll be why Celtic get beat by Kairat Almaty, because they've got enormous finances in comparison to Celtic. I mean, it is absolutely ludicrous. It's insulting. That statement alone is insulting. But again, the worst part of this was the line about the people who are bullies whose only vocation in life is to be anti-establishment. I think that is a dreadful, dreadful thing to level at people who are the customers of your business. Effectively, that's how we're treated. We're treated like customers. There's not another business in the world, not another corporate business, not another PLC that would talk to shareholders like that. Not one. Not a single one. And if there was, the people on the board would be removed immediately. Now, what we have here and why these people won't be removed and we won't get change is because turkeys don't vote for Christmas, because the votes to keep these people in place, they are done on volume of shares. It's not one person, one vote, it's one share, one vote. And between them, between Desmond and his millions of shares and everybody else who's on the same page, they all vote to keep each other. And that's the problem here. That's the fundamental flaw. They elect themselves, they are accountable to themselves and only themselves, and they are not willing to see the flaws in their structure, in their strategy, in their operation, and they are not willing to listen, to genuinely listen to the concerns of the supporters and the shareholders about that strategy. That's why we're here. And again, I'm going to round up this part about the AGM now, because I think I've said all I can say on it. It's a disgrace. I think the way things have unfolded today is an absolute disgrace. And I think with proper leadership, the Celtic board could be handling it a lot better, and it wouldn't have unfolded like that today. They would have been able to dissipate the anger. They'd been able to calm people down. They'd have shown a willingness to listen to questions and to get to questions, but they were clearly not willing to do that. And everything they say in statements and every piece of communication we actually get from them reaffirms their own belief that we are stupid and that we are wrong and that they are doing everything absolutely right and we just don't know what we're talking about. Now, tomorrow we're playing St Mirren. I'm not going to run through a starting 11 prediction. It's remarkable, really, that international football has been a welcome break from club football. Must be the first time ever I think that's happened, because that was nice to see Scotland qualify the other night. It was brilliant to see that moment for Kieran Tierney. What a goal. Never in my lifetime, I think I was 4 years old when Scotland played in France at the World Cup in 1998, so not in my living memory, even though it has happened in my lifetime. It was nice to see it. I know that not all of you will follow Scotland. A crazy moment for Ireland as well, getting themselves a playoff place when it looked like they were dead and buried in that group as well. So international football was actually quite enjoyable during that break, and now we find ourselves back to Celtic and we're dreading it because of the situation that we're in and everything that goes on off the field. But on the field, we still don't have a new manager. Would it surprise me if the board are frantically trying to get in a position where they can announce a new manager to bury this bad news about the Ross Desmond statement today and how the AGM unfolded? It would not surprise me one bit. Martin O'Neill did say that he thinks something is very close and that his time here will come to an end. Again, it's just very, very disappointing to see Martin O'Neill dragged into that today, because he sort of said it's a sad day, and Ross Desmond had the right to say what he said. He invoked the name of Jock Stein to say, I wonder what Jock Stein would think about this. And I'm not going to criticise Martin O'Neill for that. I don't think it's a great answer, but he is employed by the football club. We know that he's going to be on their side of it, like just about every employee who comes through the door. I accept it's a difficult position for him, but again, I put that on the board for putting him in that position and having him answer. I mean, Martin O'Neill has to answer for that statement that Ross Desmond put out today, that read out, today. And he goes to a press conference for St Mirren game and needs to ask questions about the dysfunctional Celtic board. I think that's appalling. But anyway, St Mirren tomorrow, a tough game for us as it always is. We know what St Mirren are like. They can make life very difficult for you. They've not been in great form in the league. They did get that brilliant win, of course, in the semi-final against Motherwell, which booked their final place in the League Cup against us. So it's almost like a dress rehearsal for that League Cup final next month. We've got lots of injuries, of course, so who knows what the starting 11 might look like. I'll be back with you tomorrow with full-time reaction to that game. Let us know your own thoughts on everything that unfolded today. Again, apologies if I've repeated myself, because I know that most of you are very clear about where I sit on this matter, but I think that's a dreadful outcome today, on behalf of the board, not on behalf of the shareholders. And I think, like I say, it marks the metaphorical end for this board, that they cannot hold a civilised AGM anymore. That's it. Like the video. Like I say, give us your own thoughts, and I'll see you tomorrow after the game. Thank you.